That night, I watched my daughter-in-law's face shift from fake sweetness to absolute terror the second she heard her own mother had drunk the wine meant for me. At 63, I realized I was no longer just a nuisance. I was a target. She does not know I spent 40 years as a nurse watching people die. If she wants to make me a victim, she is about to find out what it feels like to be the prey. My name is Eleanor Briggs. I am 63 years old, and I am currently sitting in the dark, staring at a frozen image on my laptop screen. It is a screenshot from a video call that took place 3 hours ago. The face on the screen belongs to my daughter-in-law, Brianna Lane Briggs. Usually, Brianna wears a mask of perfect, corporate politeness, the kind of expression you practice in a mirror before a board meeting. But here, in this specific millisecond, I have paused. That mask has slipped. Her eyes are wide, the whites visible all around the irises. Her mouth is twisted in a silent scream. It is not the face of a concerned relative. It is the face of a woman watching a train wreck she caused but cannot stop. Welcome back to my channel. Stories from the Porch. I know I usually use this space to talk about the best way to prune hydrangeas or the history of our little town of Maple Ridge. But tonight is different. I want you to go ahead and drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. And while you are typing, tell me something else. In the place where you live, how politely do people kill each other for money? Do they use guns? Or do they use something much softer? Something wrapped in gold ribbon and delivered with a smile. We have to go back 3 days to understand this image. 3 days ago was my 63rd birthday. I was sitting right here in my old log cabin, listening to the wind rattle the loose pane in the kitchen window. Since my husband died, the silence in this house has been heavy enough to weigh on my chest. So when the courier truck pulled up the gravel driveway, my heart actually fluttered. I thought Jason and Brianna were finally trying to fix things. I thought the tension that had been suffocating our family dinners was finally lifting. Jason is my only son. He is a mid-level accountant who sees the world in clean columns of debits and credits. He is a good man, but he is blind to the things that do not fit on a spreadsheet. He married Brianna 5 years ago. Brianna works for the Northbridge Risk Group as a senior risk assessment officer. That is her actual job title. She calculates the probability of disaster for a living. She looks at a human life, runs the numbers, and decides if it is a profitable investment or a liability to be liquidated. If I had been a school teacher or a librarian, I probably would have popped the cork on that bottle of wine the second it arrived. I would have poured myself a large glass to celebrate another year of survival. And right now, instead of recording this confession, I would be lying on a cold steel table in the county morgue while a coroner dictated the weight of my liver into a microphone. But I was a nurse for 40 years. I have smelled death before it arrives. I have seen the way people look when they are lying, and I have developed an instinct that screams when something is wrong. That instinct saved my life, but it put someone else in the crosshairs. I did not drink the wine. I gave it to her mother. I gave it to Carolyn Hart. And when I told Brianna that her own mother had taken the first sip of that expensive vintage, she did not just get upset. She nearly fainted. That is the look captured on my screen right now. It is the raw, naked terror of a hunter who realizes the trap has just snapped shut on their own leg. Why did she do it? Why did she send a weapon to my house wrapped as a gift? And why did she panic so hard when the wrong victim took the bait? I am looking at her pixelated eyes, reflecting the light of her computer screen, and I see the truth. She analyzed me. She categorized me. She decided I was a problem to be solved. I am reaching out to close the laptop now, but my hand is steady. I have made a decision. If she has classified me as a risk, then I am going to become the only risk she cannot control. Let me take you back to the afternoon this whole nightmare started. It was my 63rd birthday, a Tuesday that felt just as grey and quiet as the Monday before it. I had resigned myself to a solitary evening with a frozen dinner and a paperback novel. But then I saw the package on my front porch. It was not the usual brown cardboard Amazon box tossed carelessly near the mat. It was a heavy, wooden crate with a sliding lid, tied with a thick ribbon the colour of old gold. Inside, nestled in a bed of decorative straw, lay a bottle of red wine. It was a French vintage from 2019, the label thick and textured under my thumb. Beside it was a card, written in Brianna's terrified of imperfection calligraphy. To our wonderful mom. We hope you enjoy a taste of the good life. Love, Jason and Brianna. I carried the box into the kitchen and set it down on the island. The autumn sun was cutting sharp angles across the countertop, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I picked up the bottle again. I frowned. There was a disconnect here that made the hair on my arms stand up. For the last 4 years, Brianna's idea of a thoughtful gift had been a $20 gift card to a grocery store or a bouquet of flowers ordered from an app 5 minutes before she arrived. This bottle was expensive. It was sophisticated. It was completely out of character. I stood there, turning the heavy glass in my hands, thinking about the numbers. I know Jason's salary as an accountant, and I know Brianna is just a mid-level risk assessment officer at Northbridge Risk Group. Since when did their budget stretch to imported French luxuries for a mother-in-law she barely tolerates? My phone buzzed against the granite counter. It was a video call request from Brianna. I accepted, and her face filled the screen. She was sitting in her home office, perfectly framed by a bookshelf that I suspect she arranged just for Zoom calls. Happy birthday. Mum, she chirped. The smile was dazzling, but it did not reach her eyes. Did you get the package? Jason and I just wanted to do something special this year. I did, I said, keeping my face neutral. It is very fancy. Brianna. Thank you. Well, do not just look at it. She laughed, a sound that tinkled like breaking glass. Open it. You should have a glass right now. Celebrate the afternoon. I would love to see you take that first sip. It is supposed to have notes of... Oh, I forget. But the reviews were amazing. The pushiness was subtle, but it was there. She was leaning forward slightly, her shoulders tight. Why was she so invested in watching me drink wine at 2 p.m? I would love to. I lied smoothly, but the doctor started me on a new blood pressure medication yesterday. He was very strict. No alcohol for the first week while my body adjusts. For a split second, the video feed seemed to glitch, but it was just Brianna freezing. Her smile faltered. A flash of genuine irritation crossed her face before she plastered the mask back on. Oh, she said, her voice tight. I did not know that. I am so sorry. That is just like me, being clumsy with the timing. I watched her pupils dilate. She was recalculating. I decided to throw a variable into her equation. But you know what I said. Tapping the cork. I am having lunch tomorrow with your mother. I think I will bring it along. Carolyn would love this. We can toast to my birthday together. The reaction was visceral. Brianna actually recoiled from the camera. No, she blurted out. Then she cleared her throat, forcing a laugh that sounded like a dry cough. I mean, Mum. Honestly, That bottle is, well, it is $80. Giving it to my mother would be a waste. She drinks boxed wine from the discount bin. She would not know the difference between a Bordeaux and grape juice. The disdain in her voice was cold and metallic. It was the way you talk about a stray dog, not the woman who raised you. I think she might surprise you, I said, my voice hardening. I promised Carolyn we would try to connect more. Family is important, right? I will open it with her tomorrow. It will be a nice treat for both of us. Mom, please, Brianna said, and now I could hear the tremor of desperation. Just keep it for yourself. Wait until next week. I wanted you to have it. It is not for her. Nonsense, I said, reaching for the button to end the call. Sharing is caring. Brianna, I have to run now. Thanks for the gift. I hung up before she could argue further. The screen went black, but I could still see the ghost of her panic. She was not worried about the wine being wasted. She was worried about who was going to swallow it, and standing there in my silent kitchen. I looked at the dark red liquid inside that glass bottle and wondered for the first time if I was holding a gift or a grenade. Carolyn arrived at my doorstep at 11 in the morning, clutching a bouquet of sunflowers that were slightly drooping in the heat. She was wearing a faded floral dress that I had seen her wear to church for the last 5 years, and her face was flushed with a nervous sort of happiness. She thought this lunch was an olive branch. She thought that after years of being the other grandmother, the one with less money and less polish, she was finally being invited into the inner circle. We sat in my kitchen, and the guilt hit me before I even reached for the corkscrew. Carolyn sat there, twisting her calloused hands in her lap, telling me about her schedule. She was picking up extra night shifts at the dental office, cleaning instruments and filing charts until 2 in the morning. It is not so bad, she said, her smile displaying the gum-receding tiredness of a woman who has worked hard every single day of her life. It helps Brianna with her student loans. I know the interest rates are high, and I just want her to be free of that burden. You know, I looked at her, really looked at her. Here was a woman destroying her back to pay off debts for a daughter who had just sent me an $80 bottle of wine. The contrast between Carolyn's raw sincerity and Brianna's glossy, calculated existence made my stomach turn. But I still reached for the bottle. I cut the foil. The cork popped with a rich, expensive sound. The wine was a deep, velvety ruby colour, swirling perfectly in the glass. It smelled of blackberries and oak, completely innocent. I poured a generous glass for Carolyn. Then I poured a small amount for myself. I am ashamed to admit it, but I did not drink it. I only let the liquid touch my lips. A mimed sip for the sake of appearances, while I watched Carolyn take a long, grateful swallow. "Oh," she said, her eyes lighting up. That is really smooth. Eleanor." We chatted for another 20 minutes. We were talking about the heating bills for the upcoming winter when my phone rang. The screen flashed Brianna. I answered on speaker. "Mom." Her voice was breathless, ragged, like she had been running. "Mom? Did you drink the wine? Did you open it yet?" I kept my voice slow, deliberately calm. "I did. I am actually having a glass right now." There was a silence on the other end so profound I could hear the static of the line. "Then?" Brianna spoke again, her voice trembling. "Just you, are you? Alone?" "No," I said, locking eyes with Carolyn across the table. "I told you, I am having lunch with your mother." Carolyn leaned toward the phone, beaming. It is delicious. Brianna, thank you so much. Honey. The sound Brianna made was a choked, strangled noise. You gave it to her. Then the panic exploded. Mom! Mom! Listen to me! How much did you drink? Exactly how much? Carolyn frowned, confused by the hysteria coming from the speaker. Just a glass. Why is it? Do not feel okay. Brianna cut her off, shouting now. Do you feel dizzy? Is your stomach hurting? Do you feel like you are going to throw up? Carolyn blinked. Her hand went to her throat. The power of suggestion is strong, but the power of chemistry is stronger. I saw her face change. The confusion turned into fear. My tongue, Carolyn whispered, looking at me. My tongue feels a little numb, and my stomach is doing something funny. Sharp pains. My nurse training kicked the door down and took over. I did not ask any more questions. I hung up on Brianna mid-sentence. I dialed the poison control center with one hand while I grabbed Carolyn's arm with the other. I listed the symptoms, clearly potential ingestion of unknown toxin, numbness, abdominal pain. Onset, within 30 minutes. The operator was calm. Get her to the emergency room immediately. Bring the bottle with you. Do not let her drive. I dragged Carolyn to my car. She was stumbling now, clutching her stomach, her face pale and sweating. It is probably just an allergy. She gasped as I buckled her in. I might be allergic to the sulfites. Do not worry. Eleanor. I peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying against the underside of the car. We were heading toward Hartwell Memorial Hospital, doing 20 miles over the speed limit. Carolyn's phone buzzed in her lap. She looked down at it through hazy eyes. It is Brianna, she mumbled, reading the screen. Then she frowned. That is strange. I glanced over. What does it say? Carolyn read it out loud, her voice slurring slightly. She says, Mom, do not show anyone that bottle. Throw it away. Do not tell the police anything. Please. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. That was it. That was the confirmation. This was not a bad batch of grapes. This was a hit. And as I looked at the woman beside me, breathing shallowly and clutching her abdomen, I realized my daughter-in-law had made a fatal error. She had tried to kill a nurse, but she had poisoned a mother, and neither of us was going to die quietly today. The emergency room at Hartwell Memorial Hospital smelled of rubbing alcohol and anxiety. It is a scent I lived in for 4 decades, but sitting on the plastic chair in Trauma Bay, too, watching nurses stick IV lines into Carolyn's arm, it felt different. It felt personal. Dr. Harper, the attending physician, was a man I had worked with years ago. He was efficient, sharp, and currently looking very grim as he held the plastic bag containing the wine bottle I had brought in. He ordered a toxicology screen, a metabolic panel, and arterial blood gases. He did not waste time with pleasantries. He asked about the wine. Where did it come from? When was it opened? How much was consumed? I answered him with the precision of a colleague, not a panicked relative. When the preliminary results came back 45 minutes later, the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eleanor, Dr. Harper said, pulling the curtain closed for privacy. We found high levels of ethylene glycol in her blood, and traces of benzodiazepines, antifreeze and sedatives. My blood ran cold. Ethylene glycol is sweet. If you mix it with a heavy, fruity red wine, you would never taste it. But it crystallizes in your kidneys. Combined with a sedative to knock the victim out, It is a guaranteed death sentence. If Carolyn had finished that glass, or if I had been alone in my house and drunk 2 glasses like Brianna wanted, I would have fallen asleep on my sofa and never woken up. By the time anyone found me, my kidneys would have shut down, and my body would be swelling in the silence of my living room. This was not an accident, Doctor, Harper said, his voice low. This is a lethal cocktail. If she had arrived here 2 hours later, we would be talking about dialysis or a funeral. Do you have enemies? Eleanor enemies? The word sounded ridiculous for a 63-year-old widow who knits on weekends. But I did not have to think hard. I thought of the person who knows my schedule, the person who knows I live alone, the person who calculates risk for a living. I walked out to the waiting room and called Jason. "Mum," he answered on the second ring. "Is everything okay? Brianna said you guys were having lunch." "Jason? You need to come to Hartwell Memorial," I said. My voice was steady, but my hand was shaking so hard I had to grip the phone with white knuckles. "Carolyn is in the ER. She has been poisoned." What Jason laughed, a nervous, confused sound. "Poisoned Mom. Did you guys eat bad sushi or something? Not food?" "Jason, the wine Brianna sent me, it was laced with antifreeze and sedatives. That is insane." Jason stammered. "Mum, stop. Brianna sent that as a gift. She would never. The toxicology report does not lie." "Jason," I snapped, letting my anger bleed through for the first time. "Get down here. Now." When Jason arrived 20 minutes later, he looked pale. He saw the police officer talking to Dr. Harper near the desk, and the reality of it hit him. I pulled him into a quiet corner of the waiting room. He tried to argue, tried to find a rational explanation, but I cut him off. "Think. Jason," I whispered harshly. "Think about the last few months. Remember the tin of butter cookies she brought over in July? I ate 2 and vomited for 3 days. You told me it was a stomach bug. Remember the herbal tea she gave me for my heart? Every time I drank it, I got so dizzy I had to crawl to bed. I thought it was my blood pressure. It was not. She has been testing dosages on me." Jason slumped into a chair, putting his head in his hands. "Why we have money? Mom, we are doing fine. Why would she do this? Because she is greedy," I said, looking down at my son. "And she is impatient. She sees my house, my savings, my life insurance, and she sees a payout that is taking too long to mature. But there is one thing she does not know." Jason looked up, his eyes red. "What, 3 weeks ago? I went to see my lawyer," I told him. "I had a bad feeling? Call it a nurse's intuition. I changed my will. If I die under any circumstances that the coroner deems suspicious, or if there is an open investigation, my entire estate bypasses you. It bypasses her. It goes directly to a fund for victims of domestic violence." Jason stared at me, shock replacing the grief on his face. "She treated me like a risk assessment model," I said, looking toward the trauma bay where Carolyn was fighting for her life. "She calculated the timeline, the method, and the payout. She thought I was just a lonely old woman waiting to die. She forgot that I spent 40 years keeping people alive, and I know exactly what murder looks like when it tries to walk through my front door. I needed someone who would look at the evidence, not the emotion. So I stepped out into the hospital corridor and called Ava Morales. Ava is a bright, sharp-eyed investigator with the Hartwell County Police Department. She is also my niece, not by blood, but by bond. 10 years ago, when her mother was dying of cancer and the bills were piling up higher than the roof, I was the one who paid for the hospice care. She has never forgotten it. Ava arrived in 20 minutes, wearing her badge on her belt and a look of cold fury on her face. She listened to Dr. Harper. Then she carefully bagged the wine bottle and the remaining contents as evidence. "Do not confront her yet. Auntie L," Ava said, her voice low and tight. "If she knows we are coming for her, she will destroy evidence. I am bringing in Detective Cole Maddox. He handles homicide and poisonings. We are going to build a cage around her before she even knows she is trapped." Just then, my phone vibrated. It was Brianna. I looked at Ava. She nodded and signaled for me to put it on speaker. Mom Brianna's voice was high-pitched, vibrating with a mix of panic and aggression. "I just talked to Jason. He said the doctors think it is the wine that is impossible. I am telling you, that shop must have sent a bad batch. I am going to have the Northbridge legal team sue them into oblivion. They almost killed my mother. She was good. She was deflecting, projecting anger to cover her tracks. I am sure it was an accident." "Brianna," I said, keeping my tone trembling and confused. "But the police need to know where to look. Which website did you order it from? Or was it a local shop I need to tell the doctors?" There was a pause, a long, heavy silence, where I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head. "I ordered it online," she said, but the confidence was slipping. "A boutique site. I do not remember the name right now. I will have to check my email." "You do not remember the name of the place where you spent $80 on a bottle of wine?" I pressed, just a little harder. "Actually, now that I think about it," Brianna stammered, pivoting mid-sentence. I think a friend from work gave it to me." "Yes, that is right. A client gave it to her. And she gave it to me because she does not drink reds. I wanted you to think I bought it myself. I am sorry. Mum, I was trying to impress you." Ava was scribbling furiously in her notebook. "Contradiction. Changing story. We will figure it out," I said, and hung up. An hour later, Detective Maddox arrived. He was a heavy-set man with tired eyes, but he moved with the purpose of a shark smelling blood. He had already run a preliminary background check on Brianna Lane Briggs. What he found made the air in the waiting room feel thin. "She moves around," Maddox said, flipping open a tablet. "In the last 10 years, she has lived in 3 different states: Arizona, Colorado, and Florida. In each place, she gets close to someone vulnerable." He tapped the screen. "In Phoenix, she rented a room from a 70-year-old landlady. The woman died of a sudden stroke 6 months later. Brianna inherited $5,000. In Denver, she was the personal assistant to a retired architect. He had a heart attack at dinner. She got $10,000 from a specialized policy she helped him set up. In Tampa, it was an older boyfriend, 20 years her senior. Aneurysm. She got his car and a small savings account. They were all natural causes, I asked, feeling sick. On paper? Yes, Maddox said. Sudden, clean, and profitable. The amounts were never huge, never enough to trigger a federal investigation or an audit. Just enough to keep her moving to the next town. She is a parasite, Mrs. Briggs. She feeds. And when the host dries up, she moves on. I walked back into Carolyn's room. She was awake, pale as the sheets, staring at the ceiling. The IV pump clicked rhythmically next to her head. I sat down and took her hand. "Carolyn," I said softly, "Brianna is lying to us about everything. Carolyn turned her head. Tears were leaking out of the corners of her eyes, tracking into her grey hair. "She is not my daughter," Carolyn whispered. I froze. "What, I adopted her?" Carolyn choked out, her voice raw. "When she was 15, she was a foster kid. Her biological mother died in a house fire. They said it was faulty wiring, but Brianna was the only one who got out. She was standing on the lawn, watching it burn, without a scratch on her." Carolyn squeezed my hand, her grip weak, but desperate. "Everyone around her gets hurt. Eleanor, my dog, died 2 days after she came to live with me. My mother fell down the stairs a year later. I tried to tell myself it was just bad luck. I loved her. I wanted to save her. But she is not right. She has never been right." I looked out the window at the parking lot below, where the police cruisers were flashing their lights. A chill went through my bones that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. Brianna was not just a greedy daughter-in-law who wanted my house. She was a predator who had been refining her craft for over a decade. She had been poisoning people, burning them, and watching them die since she was a child. And I was just the latest project on her list. I realized something sitting in that hospital cafeteria while Carolyn slept off the sedatives. The law is a blunt instrument, but Brianna is a scalpel. She knows how to navigate the grey areas of insurance claims and plausible deniability. She could claim the wine was a shipping error, or that a disgruntled employee at the vineyard spiked it. She could play the victim, cry in front of a jury, and walk away with a suspended sentence while I spent the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. That was not acceptable. I did not just want to survive. I wanted to dismantle her. I wanted to ruin her reputation, her finances, and her freedom. I sat down with Ava and Detective Maddox and laid out the terms. "I am going back to the cabin," I told them, my voice leaving no room for argument. "I am going to be the bait. She thinks she failed because of bad luck. I need her to believe that I am old, I am confused, and I am still vulnerable. If she thinks she can still fix this, she will try again. And when she steps across my threshold with intent to kill, I want to be the one looking into her eyes when her world collapses." Maddox hesitated, but he agreed to set up the surveillance. The hardest part was Jason. My son was a wreck, torn between the horror of the evidence and the woman he had shared a bed with for 5 years. He wanted to confront her, to scream, to file for divorce immediately. "No," I said, gripping his shoulder. "You have to stay. If you leave her now, she will know the game is up, and she will run. You have to go home. You have to tell her you are stressed about work. Tell her. Tell her I am getting senile. Tell her you think I made a mistake about the wine." It broke my heart to use my son as a pawn, but I needed Brianna to feel safe. I needed her to feel like she was still in control. That evening, I logged onto my social media account. I posted a photo of a sunset from my porch, accompanied by a long, rambling caption. I wrote about how terrified I was when the wine turned out to be spoiled, and how I was just so grateful my dear friend Carolyn was recovering from a severe allergic reaction. I did not blame anyone. I wrote, "Life is too short for lawsuits and anger. I am just an old woman who wants peace in her final years." It was the digital equivalent of rolling over and exposing my throat. Brianna took the bait. She showed up at my door the next morning. She looked contrite, dressed in soft pastels, carrying a basket of organic jams and gluten-free crackers. I let her in. I shuffled my feet a little more than usual. I let my hand tremble when I poured the tea. I had a digital recorder taped to the underside of the kitchen table, spinning silently. "Mom, I have been sick with worry," Brianna said, her eyes wet with practiced tears. "I cannot believe that shop sent such a terrible bottle. I feel responsible." "Oh, honey, stop," I said, waving a hand dismissively. "It was just a mistake. My memory is not what it used to be anyway. Maybe I left it out in the sun, or maybe it mixed poorly with my medication. I get so confused lately." I saw the tension leave her shoulders. She bought it. She thought I was just a doddering old fool who had luckily dodged a bullet. "I just want everyone to be happy," I continued, staring into my tea. "In fact, this whole scare made me think. I need to make sure you and Jason are protected. Really protected." "I called my lawyer this morning." Brianna froze. Her hand hovered over the basket of jams. "Your lawyer. Why to update my will?" I lied smoothly. "The current one is so outdated. I want to make sure that if anything happens to me, the house and the savings go directly to Jason and you, without any red tape. I want to secure your future before I get any worse." I watched her face carefully. I saw the greed flare up, battling with the suspicion. That is very generous." "Mum," she stammered. "He is coming over this Sunday to finalize the paperwork," I said, dropping the anchor. "Once we sign it, everything is locked in stone. It will be a relief to have it done. Sunday was 4 days away." Brianna smiled, but her hand tightened around the handle of the wicker basket. Her knuckles turned bone white. She was doing the math. If I died before Sunday, the old will, which she assumed gave everything to Jason, would stand. If I lived past Sunday, she would have to wait years for me to die naturally to get the money. She needed a tragedy to happen, and she needed it to happen in the next 96 hours. "Well," Brianna said, her voice dropping an octave, "we definitely want to make sure everything is correct. You should rest." "Mom, you look tired." "I am," I said, smiling at the wolf in my kitchen. "I am very tired." As she walked out the door, I knew the clock had started. She was not going to wait for a shipping error this time. She was going to come for me herself. The war moved from the hospital room to the living room, and then it moved online. Brianna realized that the ground was shifting beneath her feet, so she did what any modern predator does. She started controlling the narrative. I sat on my porch with a cup of cold coffee, scrolling through her social media feed. She had posted a black and white photo of herself, looking out a window, looking pensive and brave. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. It read, "It is so hard watching the people you love lose their grip on reality. First the confusion, then the paranoia. I am just trying to be a good daughter-in-law. But it hurts to be accused of things that do not make sense. Please pray for our family as we navigate these golden years with patience." She was painting me as senile. She was laying the groundwork so that if I suddenly died or started screaming accusations, everyone would just shake their heads and say, "Poor Eleanor, she finally lost it." It was working on Jason. He came by the house later that afternoon, his eyes red-rimmed. "Mum," he said, his voice thick with exhaustion. "Brianna is a mess. She says the police are trying to scapegoat her for a shipping error just to close the case. She told me about her foster mum. She said that woman used to control her, used to accuse her of stealing. She thinks you are doing the same thing." "And you believe her?" I asked, keeping my voice level. I do not know what to believe, Jason shouted, then lowered his voice. I know she is ambitious. Mum? But she is my wife. She wakes up next to me every day. The idea that she could be... He could not finish the sentence. While Jason was spiraling, Ava sent me a text. Her colleagues had flagged a phone call Brianna made earlier that morning. She had contacted an insurance lawyer in a neighboring city, asking hypothetical questions about accidental death payouts regarding in-home injuries and the specific timeline for widow benefits. She was not just defending herself. She was researching the next step. Then Carolyn came over. She was still weak, her skin having a greyish cast, but her mind was sharp. We sat in the kitchen, and she told me something that made my blood freeze. It was the tea, Carolyn whispered, her hands trembling around her mug. A few months ago, Brianna brought me this herbal blend for stress. I drank a cup before driving to the grocery store. Halfway there, my vision tunneled. I almost drove into a ditch. I thought it was just fatigue. I thought I was working too hard. She looked up at me, horror in her eyes. She was testing the dosage. Eleanor. She was seeing how much it took to incapacitate me without killing me. I started a logbook. I wrote down every time Brianna came to the house. I noted every item she touched. I noted when she offered to help organize my pillbox so I would not get confused. 2 days later, Detective Maddox executed a digital warrant on Brianna's search history. He called me, his voice grim. We found her search terms from last week, Maddox said. She was not looking up wine reviews. She was searching for partial poisoning symptoms and how to distinguish myocardial infarction from chemical inducement. She is looking for a way to stop your heart that looks like natural causes. But the final blow came from Jason. He showed up at my door late Thursday night. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. He was holding a USB drive in his hand, and he was shaking so hard he could barely stand. I found it, he choked out. She left her laptop open. She went to the shower. I wanted to see if she was emailing that wine shop. I wanted to prove you wrong. Mom. I wanted to prove she was innocent. Come inside, Jason, I said gently. He walked into the kitchen and collapsed onto a chair. There was an Excel file. It was hidden in a folder labeled Tax Returns, but the file name was EB Projection. EB, Eleanor Briggs. I opened it, Jason said, tears finally spilling over. It is a spreadsheet. Mum, it lists your age. It lists your blood pressure history. It has an estimated value for this cabin, your savings, and the life insurance policy Dad left. And there is a column on the far right. What does it say? I asked, though I already knew. It says liquidation window, Jason whispered. And the date is set for this coming weekend. He handed me the drive. I copied it. I took it. I looked at the small silver device in my hand. It was the smoking gun. It was the proof that his wife saw me as nothing more than a line item to be balanced. But then I looked at my son, and terror washed over me. Jason, I said urgently, did you close the file? Did you leave the laptop exactly how you found it? I think so, he said. I do not know. I panicked. If she checks the recent files list, I said, gripping his arm. If she sees that spreadsheet was opened while she was in the shower, she will know. She will know you know. My son was no longer just the husband of a suspect. He was living in the house with a woman who had already decided that murder was a valid financial strategy, and he had just stolen her playbook. My house was no longer a home. It was a stage set for a tragedy, wired for sound and vision. On Saturday morning, Detective Maddox and a technician from the department arrived in an unmarked van. They worked with the efficiency of a pit crew, installing pinhole cameras in the crown moulding, behind the eyes of a ceramic owl on the mantelpiece and atop the kitchen cabinets. Microphones were taped under the dining table and behind the spice rack. Ava sat in the van parked 2 streets over, staring at a bank of monitors, testing the feeds. The plan was simple, brutal, and dangerous. We were staging a signing for my new will. I had invited my actual lawyer, Mr. Henderson, to come over on Sunday afternoon. He knew the situation, and though he was terrified, he agreed to play his part. The narrative we were feeding Brianna was clear once this document was signed. Her access to my assets would be severely restricted, locked away in a trust managed by a third party. If she wanted the money, she had to stop that pen from hitting the paper. She was running out of time, and desperation makes people sloppy. We knew she was already trying to accelerate the timeline, late Saturday night, while doing a perimeter check. Maddox found something under my sedan. The brake line had been nicked. It was not severed completely, just cut enough that if I had driven down the steep hill toward town, the pressure would have snapped the line and sent me careening into the ravine. I had not driven anywhere that night. Her plan B had failed because I decided to stay in and watch Jeopardy. She is panicking, I told Ava over the secure line. A risk assessor does not cut brake lines unless the actuarial tables are falling apart. She is accepting variables she cannot control. That is good for us. Sunday arrived with a sky the color of a bruise. At 2 p.m, Mr. Henderson arrived, looking pale and clutching his briefcase. 10 minutes later, Brianna's car pulled into the driveway. She walked in looking like the picture of dutiful family devotion. She wore a navy dress and carried a ceramic dish covered in foil. "I made a pecan pie," she announced, her voice trembling just slightly with forced cheer. "I know how stressful legal stuff can be. I thought we could all have a slice while we talk." I looked at Ava's hidden camera in the hallway mirror. We both knew that pie probably contained enough sedatives to put a horse to sleep. If Mr. Henderson ate it, we would have a complicated crime scene. "That is lovely. Brianna," I said, moving toward the dining table where the papers were spread out. "Put it right here." As she set the pie down, I turned, holding a full mug of hot coffee. I let my hand spasm, a calculated jerk of the wrist that sent the dark liquid splashing all over the foil, the table, and the carpet. "Oh no," I cried out, putting a hand to my mouth. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry." "It is okay, Mom," Brianna said, though her jaw tightened. "Do not worry, I will. I will get some towels." "Check the cabinet under the sink," I said, sinking into my chair, feigning exhaustion. I need to catch my breath. Brianna hurried into the kitchen. She was out of my direct line of sight, but she was not invisible. On the monitor in the van, Ava was watching every move. Brianna grabbed a roll of paper towels, but she did not come back immediately. She glanced toward the living room to make sure Mr. Henderson and I were distracted. Then, with a speed that was almost impressive, she opened the cabinet where I kept my daily medications. She reached for the orange bottle labeled with my blood pressure prescription. In one fluid motion, she pocketed it and replaced it with an identical bottle from her purse. The camera atop the fridge caught the label perfectly. It was the same medication, but the dosage on the new bottle was 3 times higher. A triple dose of beta blockers would stop my heart within an hour, and it would look exactly like cardiac arrest. "Got them?" she called out, her voice bright and helpful. But just as she closed the cabinet, Ava's voice crackled in my earpiece, urgent and distorted. "Eleanor. Signal. Losing the feed." I frowned, tapping my ear. "Ava? There is interference." Ava's voice cut in and out through a wave of static. "Someone is jamming us. High frequency. Blocking the cameras." I looked out the front window. A white utility truck had just pulled up to the curb, idling loudly. It had no markings, no license plate on the front. A man in a grey cap was sitting in the driver's seat, looking at a device in his lap. My heart hammered against my ribs. Brianna was a risk assessor. She did not know how to jam police frequencies. She did not know how to scramble Wi-Fi signals. She walked back into the dining room with the paper towels, smiling that shark-like smile. "Here we go," she said softly. "Let me clean that up for you." "Mom." I looked at her, and then I looked at the truck outside. The terror that gripped me was cold and sharp. We thought we were trapping a lone amateur. But as the static screamed in my ear, I realized Brianna might have hired professional help. And if the cameras were down, I was no longer the hunter. I was just an old woman trapped in a house with a killer. The house felt heavy after the lawyer left. Mr. Henderson had played his part perfectly, looking nervous and official, before hurrying out to his car with his briefcase clutched to his chest. I had warned him strictly not to eat or drink anything, and he had looked at the pecan pie on the table like it was a loaded gun. Once his taillights disappeared around the bend, the police presence melted away. Detective Maddox pulled the surveillance van back to the main road, leaving only a single patrol car hidden deep in the woods at the end of the lane. They were confident they had enough footage of Brianna swapping the pills. They thought the trap was sprung. But I knew my daughter-in-law. She does not just rely on chemical equations. She relies on confirmation. At 8 o'clock that evening, I stood in my kitchen. The silence was thick, pressing against the windows like physical weight. I opened the cabinet and took out the bottle of blood pressure medication Brianna had tampered with. I emptied the lethal triple-dose pills into a plastic bag for Maddox, then replaced them with harmless sugar pills I had prepared days ago. I swallowed 2 of them with a glass of water, just in case she asked for a toxicology screen later. Then I picked up my phone and typed a message to her. "I feel dizzy. My heart is beating so fast. I think I need to call the doctor in the morning." The response came 30 seconds later. "Do not worry. Mom, I am coming over. I will sit with you until you fall asleep." She was coming to watch me die. I moved quickly. The jamming signal from earlier had spooked me. If she had someone outside messing with the police frequencies, I could not rely on the hidden cameras in the molding. I went to the junk drawer and dug out an old smartphone with a cracked screen. I plugged it into the charger behind the flour jar on the counter, angling the lens so it covered the kitchen table. I set it to record locally, bypassing any Wi-Fi signals. Then, I did one final thing. I took a bottle of hospital-grade antiseptic cleanser and wiped down the kitchen island. The sharp, stinging smell of sterile alcohol filled the room. It was the smell of the emergency room, the smell of trauma bays and morgues. I wanted her to smell it the second she walked in. I wanted to trigger the part of her brain that remembered every hospital bed she had stood next to while someone took their last breath. Brianna arrived 20 minutes later. She did not knock. She used her key, stepping into the hallway with the silence of a ghost. I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of herbal tea steaming in front of me. "Mom?" she called out softly. "In here," I said. My voice was raspy. I let my head loll slightly to the side. She walked into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the room instantly. She was checking for the police. She was checking for witnesses. When she saw we were alone, her shoulders relaxed. But then she sniffed the air. Her nose wrinkled. The antiseptic was working. I saw a flicker of unease cross her face, a momentary break in her composure. "I made tea," I said, pushing a mug toward her. "Chamomile. It helps with the shaking." Brianna sat down opposite me. She looked at the tea, but did not touch it. Her eyes were glued to my chest, watching the rise and fall of my breathing. "You really should lie down," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "The medication probably just needs time to settle." "I have seen this before," I said, staring into my mug. "When I was a nurse, I saw patients who took the wrong dose. It is a terrible way to go, Brianna. The heart races until it just gives up. The kidneys shut down. It is painful." Brianna stiffened. "Why are you talking about this? You are just having a side effect." "I am glad we signed the papers today," I continued, ignoring her. "Mr. Henderson filed them immediately electronically. The trust is active. It is irrevocable now. I feel so light knowing that if anything happens to me tonight, the money will finally go to the right place." I looked up and locked eyes with her. I let the mask of the confused old woman slip just an inch. "To the right place," I repeated. The color drained from her face. She did the math instantly. If the will was irrevocable and the money was in a trust, her window of opportunity had not just closed, it had been bricked over. And the way I said it, the clarity in my voice told her that she was not the one holding the pen anymore. "What did you do?" she whispered. The sweetness was gone. Her voice was cold, flat, and hard. "I secured the future," I said calmly. "Just like you wanted." Brianna stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound like a scream. She looked at the counter, where a small paring knife lay next to a bowl of lemons. Her eyes shifted from the knife to me, and then back to the knife. She realized the poison was too slow. She realized the legal route was a dead end. She was a risk assessor who had run out of options. And when you back a predator into a corner, they stop calculating and start attacking. She reached out and picked up the knife. She ran her thumb along the flat of the blade, the metal catching the dim light of the overhead lamp. "You know, Eleanor," she said, and for the first time, she did not call me Mom. "Accidents happen in the kitchen all the time. A slip on a wet floor, a fall onto a sharp object, a sudden heart attack that makes you clumsy." She took a step toward me. I did not flinch. I moved my hand under the table and pressed the button on the old phone, ensuring the red recording light was blocked by the flour jar. "Come closer, Brianna," I thought. "Let the camera see exactly who you are." I think I took too many," I stammered, clutching the edge of the table. I let my breathing hitch, a sound I had heard 1,000 times in the ICU. "The bottle. The one you fixed." I took 3. My chest feels like it is being crushed. Brianna stopped moving. The knife in her hand lowered just an inch. She watched my face, looking for the lie. But I gave her exactly what she wanted to see: fear and fading consciousness. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She thought the universe had finally corrected the error of my existence. It is not my fault. Mom, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a hiss. She took a step closer, the blade catching the light. You did this. You and your lawyers and your sudden need to control everything. Old people should not hoard money they do not need. You are just a drain on resources. You were supposed to just go to sleep quietly. She was close now, looming over me. Brianna, I gasped, letting my head droop. Tell me, the wine, the ethylene glycol, how long? How long does it take to destroy the kidneys? She laughed softly, a sound devoid of humanity. 12 to 24 hours for the metabolites to crystallize. But with the sedatives, you just drift off. It is painless. Much better than a heart attack. And the pills, I whispered. 3 times the dose. Is that enough? For a woman of 63 with your history. She sneered. It is a guaranteed myocardial infarction. No autopsy would even look twice. She had done it. She had laid out the method, the timeline, and the intent. She had confessed to the chemistry of murder. I stopped shaking. I lifted my head and looked her dead in the eye. The fog in my gaze vanished, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a woman who has handled trauma cases tougher than her. The thing you did not calculate, I said, my voice steady and clear, is that an old nurse knows how to act, and I am the one who holds the keys to this house. Before she could process the change, I kicked the leg of her chair with every ounce of strength I had left. The chair skidded, hitting her shins. She stumbled back, crying out in surprise, and the knife clattered to the floor. At that exact second, the living room lights blazed to life. The front door burst open. Police drop it, get on the ground. Detective Maddox, Ava, and 2 uniformed officers swarmed into the kitchen, guns drawn. They had heard every word. The old phone I had propped up was not just recording. It was on an open line to Ava's cell phone. The jamming had been a bluff. Or perhaps the cellular signal cut through where the Wi-Fi failed. It did not matter. They had the confession. Brianna screamed. It was a primal, animalistic sound. No. She set me up. It is a trap. She took the pills. Check her blood. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my sweater. I walked over to the cabinet, the one Brianna had raided earlier, and pulled out the orange bottle she had swapped. You mean these? I asked calmly. I opened the bottle and dumped the contents onto the table. They were white, round, and completely harmless. Sugar pills, I said. I swapped the real medication out 2 days ago, and the bottle you tried to plant, the one with the lethal dose. I reached into a locked metal box inside the pantry and held up a sealed evidence bag containing the real pills. It has been in here the whole time, and the bottle you just touched has been dusted with UV powder. Your fingerprints are all over a murder weapon that never even got loaded. Brianna slumped against the refrigerator as an officer cuffed her hands behind her back. Her face was twisted in ugly, raw hatred. You stole my life, she screamed, spitting the words at me. I deserve that money, I earned it. You are just a useless old burden, you should be dead. I looked at her, at the woman who had tried to turn my family into a math problem. You forgot one thing in all your risk tables. Brianna, I said, my voice cutting through her screams like ice. Victims sometimes know how to count. It has been 3 months since that night. The legal proceedings are ongoing, but the evidence is overwhelming. Jason is heartbroken, But he is healing. He is learning that the emptiness of a quiet house is better than the fullness of a lie. As for me, I went back to my lawyer. We finalized the will. The bulk of my estate is now set to go to a trust for survivors of domestic abuse, with a generous portion reserved for Carolyn Hart, who is recovering slowly but surely. She and I have lunch every Tuesday. We drink tea. We never order wine. I am sitting on my porch now, holding a steaming mug of Earl Grey. The autumn leaves are turning gold, and the air is crisp. This is the only revenge an old woman can live with, the revenge of survival. I took back my narrative. I refuse to be a statistic. If your daughter-in-law sends a bottle of wine to your house, do me a favor. Ask yourself one question before you pop that cork. Does she want to congratulate you, or does she want to see if you are paying attention? Thank you so much for listening to my story on Grandma's Family Diary. I want you to jump into the comments right now and tell me where you are tuning in from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update, and hit the hype button to help this story get heard by more people. Stay safe out there, and trust your gut.